Welcome back, everybody, to I'm still trying to work out and massage the actual title of this. I think it's going to be like Notes, Books, Cozy Corner. This is where I talk about my books, what I've been reading, my, reading fun times, and it's just a chill vibe. I feel like this is, as I mentioned at the end of my introductory video, this is going to be more of like a second screen kind of a video where I'll just be yammering on. You can have it on in the background. You can zone out for a little bit. You won't really miss much because it's just me providing you with company. And that's what I'm really hoping that these videos do. I have a plethora of these types of videos that I watch where, this is when I have, a meal or, I'm folding my laundry. That's what I'm kind of hoping for this. So today's video, we're going to be talking about the 5 books that I read in January. I'm going to be giving a spoiler-free review and talk about my thoughts about these books, and then I'll go into some spoiler territory for each of these books. But I'll give little time codes so that if you wanted to read it and you don't want to have things spoiled, you can just skip ahead to those timestamps. So yeah, as I said, I read 5 books across 2025's January. I was quite sick actually at the beginning of this month, or I guess last month. So it gave me a chance to really dive into a lot of these books. And some of these books I was really excited to read. They were recommended to me either through my favorite podcast, which is Reading Glasses. I'll be mentioning that quite a bit. This is just a massive plug for Reading Glasses. But also a lot of these were just things that I was given from friends and family. Most of these I don't have on physical media. I think of these, 2 of them were ebooks, 2 of them were audiobooks, and 1 was a physical book. So when I don't have them in physical media, which is all but 1, I'll have like the cover here so you can see what I'm talking about. And for the actual physical one, I'll hold it up. So I'm going to go chronologically of the books that I read, and the first book that I read this year was Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. This was one that I was really excited for. This was one that I had on my to be read for quite a while, and I enjoyed it. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as I was hoping. The one thing that I really did love about this book was how fast-paced it was. From the opening chapters, it was like go, 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 go. The point of view is literally this shape-shifting creature. I don't want to call it a monster because the monster, like, they keep referencing that this creature is a monster throughout the book, and that's kind of one of the main themes of the book is like what really is monstrous, who is a monster, what is a monster, what are the actions of a monster. But it's the point of view of the monster almost in the same way that Grendel took the point of view of the Beowulf creature of Grendel. Right from the beginning, it's, this creature is getting hunted and it needs to find a way to survive. There are certain things that I really enjoyed about this book, and there was a few things that I thought were a little bit lacking. The first thing that I really enjoyed was, once again, how fast-paced it was. It was really hard for me to put this book down because things were always happening. The actual mechanics of the creature I thought were really interesting because in order to shapeshift, the creature had to absorb things. So, if it killed another creature, it could absorb bones and organs and things like that. So very early on in the book, she kills a human and is able to take on the jaw so that they have a working jaw. I thought that was really great. The writing style just flew by. Like, John did a really good job of writing very easy to read passages. Some of the character dynamics were really good. The lead character, the creature, Shashishan, falls in love, or I guess you start to realize she begins to fall in love with the daughter of, this big baroness of the land. It's very kind of like fairy tale-ish in that sense, and I kind of like that. I'm going to go into some spoiler territory, so go to this timestamp if you want to avoid spoilers. I'm going to give you a countdown from 3, 2, 1, and we're getting into spoiler territory. I thought it was really interesting how, as the book continues, you're getting more of the daughter's family dynamic, and that's where this real concept of what is monstrous, because she's been basically abused by her family this whole time. Younger and older siblings of her, like, really abuse her. And that's, at least it was handled well. Like, John does a really good job of handling some of these more tough concepts very well. It's never heavy-handed, it's never cheesy, and it never feels, like, inauthentic, which is really bad to say, like, oh yeah, it felt real. But, you know, sometimes when you're dealing with family trauma and abuse like this, it can feel heavy-handed, it can feel overblown, and it's like, oh, this is somebody that either didn't do their research or they didn't live through it, so they don't really have anything to draw from, and it just feels forced. This at least felt very real, and it felt very established. The twist at the end, when you find out that the mother is the mother of Shishishan, and she herself killed the mother and took on her form, and that's where I was saying it's really interesting to see the shape-shifting trope being used in a newer kind of way, even though this has been done hundreds of times. I really liked how I didn't spot it coming, because sometimes you can see these things coming, but it also kind of shows, you know, the family trauma being passed down to child to child to child. The ending was quite satisfying. You know, it was a very happily ever after. I did feel as if that final chunk, because each, like, the book is separated by these chunks, and then you have chapters within the chunks. And I felt like the final chunk really didn't need to be there. Like, it's basically them raising the child of Shishishin's massive glob that she spews out of her, you know, midway through the book, and takes on a sentience of their own, and how troublesome it is to raise a child, and how you don't necessarily, as parents, mean to screw up your kids, but even within your best efforts, you're going to, and how challenging it can be to be a parent, especially an absent parent, because half of the year Shishishan has to hibernate. I don't know if that was really needed in this book. I wonder if John wanted to write like a second book with some challenges and another plot with these elements in there. It might have served the overall story a little bit better. It just felt like this ending was a little bit tacked on. Still a fine book. What did I finally give this? I rated it, yeah, I think it was like a 3 out of 5 stars for me. So like, it was fine, but not one that I think I'd go back to immediately. The next book that I read is actually the one I have in physical format, and that's Coup de Grace. This is by Sophia Ardram, I believe is how you pronounce her. I got this in a book, what was it? Like a subscription box. In 2024, I guess in 2023, my wife got me a subscription box to my favorite bookstore. It's Little Ghosts. This is where this sweatshop is, you know, Little Ghost Books. So she got me their subscription box. So every month I got 2 books, a handful of stickers, and a couple bookmarks. And this was one of them. This was also a book that was mentioned on Reading Glasses. And what I like is that it comes with some stuff. You know, you got a little postcard and a little, you know, travel ticket, and it's signed. So that's really interesting. The overall plot is that, you know, it follows this gentleman. It lives in Montreal, and they want to commit, you know, they want to unalive themselves. They've had it. They're done. So they decide to get on the subway, go to the end of the line, get off, walk to the Montreal River, and then just like I think the Montreal River is the St. Lawrence, it could be, and then just like basically walk into the river, fill their pockets with rocks, and drown themselves. But when they kind of doze off, they wake up in this labyrinth of a subway station that they can't get out of. And so it's very psychological in that sense. It's very introspective, and it really challenges this character of, do they actually want to unalive themselves? Do they want to commit the act? Or do they want to try to get out of this labyrinth to get out? And you know, once again, some of the themes of this are pretty deep. I really enjoy the depression and the need to unalive themselves and just to shuffle off this moral coil is a labyrinth that you are desperate to get out of. You know, when you've built up these walls, when you cannot function and you just want to end it all. That's that metaphor of the labyrinth, of being lost, not being able to take control of their own lives. You know, it's become completely unmanageable. And there are certain things in this book that I like. I feel like they handled this for the most part very well. But there are a few things that I'm like, I don't know about that. The first off is how disjointed the narrative does feel, because you go from chapter to chapter to chapter, and it doesn't necessarily feel all that connected. And I know that's part of the overall vibe. You know, this character is very disjointed. They don't know what's going on from moment to moment, and it does provide a very disjointed experience. But as a reader, I didn't enjoy that. That's where I was feeling a little bit about. I think at this point, I think I'm going to get into some spoilers. So once again, I've got the time code down there for anybody that's looking to not be spoiled. We'll see you after the spoilers. For anybody that doesn't want to be spoiler alert, I'll give you that 3, 2, 1, and we're getting into some spoilers. It was interesting seeing how he would meet characters in this labyrinth, and he only really meets this woman that doesn't actually make it, but it doesn't feel all that earned. It's like she's here for a little bit. There's like a little bit of a connection that's made, and then she's gone. It's unclear whether or not she actually dies because she falls down this elevator shaft or this well. But she just kind of disappears. And I'm like, okay, are you trying to show how when people come into your life and you're in this kind of state, there's no perch, there's no connection. It's just kind of here and gone. That one kind of left me a little bit more confused than anything else. Especially when we were in deep disconnected moments of this book. And the ending I thought was interesting, where it became this kind of choose your own adventure, where, the point of view character finally just says, I'm done. I don't want to make these decisions anymore. I'm fed up. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. You as a reader, you guys get to make up however this ends. And I thought this was really interesting, but it did kind of do this really weird shift where it was a traditional first person point of view throughout most of it. And then near the end, that's when they started to talk to the reader directly rather than do it throughout. And I wondered if they had done it throughout, it wouldn't have felt as stark or as disconnected as it did in the final product. Because like I'm reading it and all of a sudden they're talking to me directly. I'm like, oh, is this like, again, a allegory for the person completely losing his mind? I don't know. Like that's one of the things that I'm like, that was an interesting choice. One that could have worked maybe if there was a little bit more planning done leading up to this point. I also really liked how there were two kind of aspects of the choose your own adventure, right? It's like, what do I do? Do I go back into the labyrinth? Do I try my way out there? Do I, or do I just sit and do nothing, right? Or do you as a reader reject this concept? And of the three choices, they all lead to him going to a payphone with money to make a call. And, that once again showcases how there's a removal of choice from the character. There's, no matter what he does, he will always lead to this one area. And I thought that was an interesting concept that maybe could have been fleshed out a little bit more, again, throughout the book, rather than it being thrown in right at the end. And then once again, the payphone at least gives you 3 distinct endings. And I kind of like that aspect to this book where, he either calls home, he calls the gentleman that he met on the subway at the very beginning to perhaps go on a date, to establish a relationship, to basically continue living. And then finally, there was the number to call whatever the last number that was on this payphone was. So it kind of showcases once again, within this character, does he just go back to what's familiar to what got him into this situation? Does he try something new to continue living, to try again? Or does he just kind of give up? Does he just completely give up? And that was one of the moments that I really enjoyed of this book, and I really, really attached myself to. In the end, Coup de Grace was a interesting read. It is very short. It's more of a novella than it is an actual novel. So I might return to it now that I know kind of the rhythm and the flow of this book, but it probably won't be anytime soon. My final rating was 3 out of 5 stars. The next book, let's move on to the next book, was Why We Remember, Unlocking Memory's Power to Hold On to What Matters by Charan Ragnarath. I'm so sorry, Charan. This was an audiobook. So I had the audiobook. I listened to it basically on a road trip that I was on. And it was fascinating. I spent 5 years studying psychology, and I think 2 of those 5 years was spent specifically on the brain and neuropsychology and neuroscience. And a big chunk of that, because if anybody has studied neuropsychology, you know that a big chunk of it is memory and where memory is stored and how people remember and blah, 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 blah. So I find with a lot of psychological nonfiction books, it's either one of two things. Either it's super surface level for novices and for interested individuals that haven't actually studied psychology before, and for me it just feels very review, very surface level, and like I like getting down into the weeds, or it reads like a textbook, and you're getting into the weeds, but there's no personality, there's no narrative. It's basically just an extended journal article. And it's like, well, if I wanted to read that, I'd read journal articles, and I do. But when I come to a book, I want a personality, I want a narrative, I want a story construction. And this book does blend the two in a way that I found very entertaining. Charan does a really great job of creating these stories to help flush out these very heavy concepts. And it was less about, and he says right up at the very beginning, this book is less about how we remember and the mechanics and why we forget and why it is that things don't work properly in our brain, and rather why it is that we remember. What services do these memory pathways have? How did it help us, when we were very primitive and, monkeys in the trees and that kind of stuff? And why did we even develop the memory passageways that we have? Why is it that it is easier for us to remember certain things and not other things? And I really love that approach. He does touch upon some of the founders of these types of researches, like Elizabeth Loftus, and kind of diving deep into some of the controversies within that as well, and really challenging the narrative of why it is that we remember and how it is that we remember, and can we trust our memories all the time. And it was really, really fascinating. Again, it was a fairly short one. I think I blew through it in about a weekend. I love the cultural references that he pulls in from time to time. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, this one was a great read. This one got 4 out of 5 stars for me, mainly because not only was it a review of things that I already know, but it was a building off of things and kind of like diving a little bit deeper in the things that I didn't actually know about. So yeah, it was a great time. I would highly recommend it. Another audiobook that I read, because I kind of read these guys back to back, was Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Clario Perez, I believe is how you pronounce her name, Caroline Perez. This was an interesting one because there was a lot of things on here that I really, really found fascinating, and it was all about how within studies or, just designing things, and how almost every facet of the world that we navigate in, men are the default and women are the afterthought, if a thought at all. And this goes from everywhere from medical science. I'm currently reading Doing Harm, which kind of does a dive deep into the medical side of things. But basically how women are excluded in medical trials because A, they have too much variance because of the hormones that they go through, and B, how they are too similar to men. So why don't we just use men anyway? And like the two are contradictory. Like the two don't make sense. So it's like the medical profession throughout the histories have really done themselves dirty because of these medical afflictions that predominantly affect half of the population, isn't really getting treated properly. Migraines, for an example in this book, are underfunded and understudied because it predominantly affects women more often than men. And I get migraines and I'm like, well, you done me dirty, medical science. Even though I privilege quite readily being, assigned male at birth, there's, this big aspect of my life that never really got studied properly because it doesn't affect a lot of men. But also like car designing was always designed first for men and second for women. Like women get car sick more often because they weren't considered when designing where the center of gravity within their own body sits in a car. Seat belts aren't designed for pregnant women, and the height ratio isn't set very well for women. How women's bodies behave in car crashes. Women are more often killed or injured in a car crash than men, and it's because crash test dummies are predominantly made for men rather than for women. So like these things that most people wouldn't even think about because it's so much ingrained in the water that we swim in, that, this really challenges that. And there are a few moments in this book, like I'm a data-driven person, so like I want to see the studies. I want to see, when Caroline is talking about, studies show or research shows. It's like, well, tell me who the author is so I can go back and listen to it. Or I can go and seek out this research, because one of my favorite things to do when I'm listening or reading to a nonfiction book is to either go to the bibliography or the references or whatever, find the sources that they're going and doing a deeper dive into the research that these people were using. And maybe that's the hindrance of an audiobook for these kinds of things, because you can't necessarily go to the works cited at the end of the book whenever they're saying something. I don't know if there were footnotes. I don't know if there were cites, but at least in the audio side of things, I would have liked Caroline, who does the audio, to at least cite her references so I can go and read about it, because there were so many moments where she was saying, a study showed in 2014. It's like, well, tell me who it was so that I can go and see that. That was one of the few instances that I felt a little bit more annoyed about the author, because I love seeing that site works, and unfortunately an audiobook isn't the place for that. There are also a few moments where she does a little bit of a jump in, I don't want to say a jump in logic, because that's not quite right, but there's some aspects in it where I'm like, you kind of made a jump of that because of the lack of information and the lack of data. I do understand that Caroline has to infer quite a bit here, because it's like, okay, well, because women weren't included in this, we don't actually know if it's similar or if it's not. And so there's a number of examples presented in this book that I wish had a little bit more kind of grounding on it, rather than Caroline being like, okay, well, this is what it might be, or this is how it could be, or, because things weren't included here, it's not so good over here. And it's like, well, I get it. And I also completely understand that, presenting male, it's hard for, I don't want to come right out of the gates and be like, it was horrible, it was bad, why are we... But there are a few things that I found, I wish that she either expanded upon or found data to support some of her claims. Still a fascinating book, and I know that this book, it was published in 2019, especially when she was talking about some of the political side of things, because that got me real angry. Not because of what Caroline was, not on behalf of Caroline, but the overall political climate, of all the world leaders, such a small fraction of them are women. And when politicians are making decisions for women, it's like they're not even consulting women about that. And that is what infuriates me. And showing the data about that was like, ugh. So I would love to see a follow-up to this book now in 2025. We're about, 5-6 years out since this book was originally published. And I'm sure a lot has, changed for the better and changed for the worst. So I would love to see kind of a follow-up to this, because I would 100% be first in line to read that. So yeah, this one gets another 4 out of 5 stars for me. Really, really like that. Let's move on to the last one. This was another ebook that I read, the second one, and that was We Used to Live Here by Marcus Klauer, I believe is how you pronounce his name. It started as a haunted house book, and this was a book that really creeped me out. I thought it was very creepy. One of the first books to really scare me. Essentially, it's this couple that is doing house flipping. And so they buy this fairly large house in the mountains, and is at the very beginning stages of fixing the house up to flip it and sell it back. The point of view character very quickly... There's so much going on that I don't know how much I can get within the non-spoiler part. Essentially, her girlfriend is out, and this family knocks on the door. The father is saying, hey, I used to live here when I was a kid. That's where the whole title of We Used to Live Here comes from. Do you mind if I show my family around to see what's changed and what stay the same? It would mean a lot for me. I know this is coming out of nowhere, and we're just dropping it on you. I hope that's okay. And after a little bit of back and forth where she really doesn't want to do that, she really she's trying to push the family away. Eventually she relents and lets the family through. And it very quickly becomes a haunted house book. She is seeing things. The father of this family who used to live here is kind of like trying to ask her, hey, are things weird here? But not giving so much away that she knows exactly what he's talking about. And I found the setup, and as we're starting to get into the weeds of things, very, very creepy. I think at this point, this is where I'm going to start into spoilers. So I'm going to give everybody the countdown before I go into spoiler. You can find the time code here to jump to, and I'll give everybody 3, 2, 1. We're going into spoilers. At the midpoint of this book, when it's very obvious that these folks are not leaving, right? Like, they are very clearly not leaving, and it is not their intention to leave. She is trying to find more information about it. The one neighbor that lives kind of close is giving information to her that doesn't match up with the information that he's giving. And it stops being essentially a haunted house book and starts being a paranoia psychological horror where you can't trust your reality. Like, what is reality? What's going on? Like, what's in your mind? What's in your head? What's real and what's not real? And I find that intriguing, but not scary. Whereas the haunted house aspect of it, when it was still doing the haunted house, that's where I found it scary. And I'm a little saddened that we went from scary to intriguing because, eventually you find out that the story that he told of I had a sister. She wasn't actually my sister. We found her in the woods and she attacked me, and we had to send her away. That was all kind of BS. And it was him that came down from the woods that was found. But he was able, and this is where it gets into that, we don't know exactly how, gets into the whole psychological thing of he was able to manipulate their memories and even maybe reality so that everybody thought that he was actually the biological kid. Even though the point of view character finds this box of old photographs that he couldn't manipulate, where it was the daughter and the parents were so much different. Instead of being the strict conservative family that they were actually quite liberal and almost like embodied hippie qualities. And he was able to kind of change all that. On the one hand, I really enjoyed that feature because it kind of showcases how people are manipulated by external sources. We're seeing that right now within the political climates where politicians are just bold-faced lying to their constituents, and people are just believing that that's how it always was, when that's not actually how it was. So I really enjoy that aspect of the book. But when I was sold a haunted house book and I got a paranoia, can you believe your own memories kind of a book, I don't know, I felt a little betrayed about that, but it was still a very, very good time. And I really like how this book showcased like what was reality and what wasn't reality. And by the end there, it was really hard for the point of view character to distinguish that, even though we as a reader are kind of led through this journey to be able to tell what is real and what isn't real. And really, it's that character that had a harder time distinguishing what wasn't and what was right by the end. The epilogue was brilliant and beautiful, where it was the girlfriend saying, hey, my girlfriend just sat up and ran away one day and we can't find her, and my family doesn't know who I'm talking about, even though we've dated for like years. So I don't know what's going on. I think I'm being crazy, but here's all this information that I've been able to find. And you realize between the chapters, that's what this woman was able to pull into. It's these conspiracy theories. It's these redacted government official documents, because at first you're like, what are all these documents in between chapters going on? And at the end of each of those, there's like this Morse code. And if you are able to figure it out, I just used a Morse code translator. The end message was like kind of horrific. I was just like, oh snap, that's, ugh. Yeah, very creepy, very scary. Really, really enjoyed it. A little saddened by the whole bait and switch by the end, but overall, this was a very creepy book. One of the first books to really scare me, and that's a hard thing to do. So, yeah, this one got a 4 out of 5 stars for me, and that's what I've got going on right now. That's we used to live here. And that's it for the books that I read in January. I'm currently reading The Bog Wife by Kay Cronister, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's a little bit of a slow go, I will admit. I feel like February is starting off with a little bit of little bit of a chug rather than a sprint. But yeah, I'll talk about that next month. My thoughts, my ratings, and yeah, it'll be a good time. But I want to know, what are you currently reading? What are the books that you've enjoyed in January? Let me know all about that. Your favorite, your least favorite. Let me know about that by commenting down below, because I'm hoping to get a little bit more of a dialogue on these. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. This one's a little bit longer. I think we're going to stay around the half-hour mark for these kind of more vloggy things of the books that I've read. I hope you are enjoying it. I know I am. And we'll catch you next month. So until next time, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.